Hi, everybody. Jean McDonald here with Transition Tip Tuesday. So glad you're watching. Today's transition tip has to do with how do we go from being who we are to being better than we are? How do we motivate ourselves to be greater, to try new things, to try new adventures? I'm often reminded of a phrase I hear a lot from Craig Valentine, and that is that good is the enemy of great. Good is the enemy of great. I got distracted there because I was hitting buttons and didn't know what was going on. Anyway, but that good can be the enemy of great. And what that means is sometimes we're so comfortable in our current space that it's hard for us to get that motivation to push hard into doing something else or to being better. Recently, I heard the story about Shannon Lavinia. And decades ago, her and her husband, they got married on a Saturday. And her husband shows up to work on Monday to find he didn't have a job anymore. And the stress from this sudden and tough transition threw him into a state of anxiety that took its toll on his health. And I believe he was even hospitalized. So Shannon and her husband John were forced into making some immediate changes in their lives to transition into something new. Well, it ended up working out. They actually risked everything. They risked more of their savings and went into a new business venture to be self employed and hired a business coach who was very expensive. And it could have gone really wrong, but it didn't. It turned out great. And she went from a teacher salary of 26,000 a year to making 6, 7 figure income. So that, but the motivation there was absolute necessity. Brendan Burchard, in his High Performance Habits book, talks about necessity as being a high performance habit because necessity, like I said, when we're comfortable, necessity doesn't play a big role in our lives. So, how do we create this necessity in order to help us transition deliberately from good to better or transition into a new adventure? Well, one way is to look at who are we helping by making this transition. And the necessity can come from creating a family legacy. It can come from uh, helping our families, uh, being an example for our family and our friends. And it can also be so that we can have this higher mission of helping others. And that can be our necessity. So we have to look at that and see if we tap into that necessity on a daily or weekly basis in order to motivate ourselves to do better, to be better. For myself, I've struggled back and forth with this. When I first decided to become self employed, I'm living on an air mattress in my best friend's basement. And there was that necessity of, okay, I've got to go out and hustle. I was starting a new jewelry and collectibles business. And I was realistic in knowing that it was going to take a couple years to get this business profitable. But I hustled and I learned and I worked. And even if I didn't make any money, I took what happened that day as a lesson to learn to do it different or learn what was working, what was not working. And I created a business that I still run on the side today. It's been over 25 years that I've had that business creating some kind of income. At its peak, I was making as much as my husband, who was a surgical nurse. And we were making the same income, which surprised him because a lot of people don't look at these small businesses as being that profitable. But it was a matter of necessity for me to create that. Now, as I'm financially independent, I still have this goal of helping others, doing the coaching, doing this transition work, to getting on here every week and talking to you about transitions and sharing things that I've learned about transitions so that you can face your tough transitions in a way that is more resilient, that is less traumatic, and that you'll take the lessons learned and move forward to be a better person, a greater person. So that's it for today. So on this transition tip is to look at areas of your life where you find that need, that necessity to to change, to do better, and that way you can practice these tools and tap into your personal reasons. They always say, what's your why? Well, that necessity to have to do it. And often we'll do something for others that we won't necessarily do for ourselves. So look at it in those terms. This Friday, we have the caregiver support group. You can go to, I don't know if I have it on the website yet, but anyway, you can contact me to get the link to sign up for the group. It's online and in person. It's in person here in Port Angeles, Washington. And it's a drop in, a 2 hour drop in where you can come in and share your questions, share your frustrations about where you are in your caregiving journey. So, thank you so much for listening. See you next week and have a great week this week looking at what's going on in your life and why is it necessary. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.